listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. To hear the full show each day, tune in to AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN or log in to accesswdun.com and click the Listen Live button from 9 to 11, Monday through Friday.
You have to try to live up to the goal that they set. We may never get there, but I think in my own life, I try not to dwell on the terror side of it. When I talk to my children, I explain to them when I have them down at the site that it was the greatest rescue mission we've ever seen. The fire department came together, they took care of their families, and they made sure that their families had the presence of the fire department in their lives, and I think that's an important part of the job.
So we're so happy to have Debra Burlingame with us right now. Debra, we've talked to several times over the last 24 years, and her brother was Chic Burlingame, that was the pilot of American Airlines 11. And I believe that's right. Is that right, Debra?
Yep. He was the captain of the plane.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So welcome to the program.
Martha, it's always so good to talk to you. I've known you for a long time now. You've really been a great friend through it all.
So tell us first how his sons are doing.
He had one daughter.
Oh, a daughter and a son. Yes.
He just had one daughter.
Okay.
And the last time I saw her was on the 5th anniversary of September 11th because she died in a terrible fire right after that.
Oh, that's so tragic.
Yes, it is. It is. She was his only child. And she had a son who was then 9 years old. He's all grown up now. But, yeah, Chic was not around for that. It would have been devastating for him.
So how long had Chic been a pilot?
I always think of him as being always a pilot because we have pictures of him, I'm not kidding, as a toddler holding airplanes. He spent his entire childhood building airplanes and flying them. And his bedroom as a kid was covered with airplanes hanging from the ceiling on the window ledges. And but he went to the Naval Academy. He got aviation right away, and so he went from basically college to the inside of a jet. And his entire adult life he was flying because he left the Navy. He was a carrier-based fighter pilot. And then when he left the Navy, he went to work for American Airlines. So I always think of him as it made 9/11 a lot harder because what I tell people is I say imagine your loved one is an Olympic swimmer and he's murdered by drowning. They kill him by holding his head underwater. That made it very hard. For his death to be associated with the airplane, his crew, and all the passengers are in there. He would have been devastated to think that could happen to his crew and passengers.
When I travel today, I like to always guess whether the pilots are Air Force pilots or Navy pilots. And generally, Navy pilots have shorter landings. Do you know what I mean? They hit the deck a lot shorter. And I'm almost always right, but I can imagine that he was that kind of pilot, right? If he was in and out of a carrier. My nephew,
well, yeah.
My nephew worked on an aircraft carrier while he was in the Navy, and he was one of those guys on the deck, that were bringing people in, and. It's to the point now where there's a lot of people walking around that don't remember 9/11 because they weren't there. Yeah. And I think it's really important for us, Debra, to keep talking about it, especially in light of everything else that's happening in the world. It seems like radical Islamists are back in power in a lot of places, and that we need to continue learning the lessons of 9/11.
That's true. They are a threat. They have their entire value system is different than ours. They do not cherish life. They encourage their own people. Gosh, in Israel right now, you have Hamas. For years, they've been pressuring mothers to put up suicide jacket on their 12-year-old sons. It's a completely different culture. So yes, I'm on the board of the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. Our project now is reaching out and educating young people about what happened that day, because we will always be under threat from these people, and they need to know. They need to know what happened, and this is the legacy we leave them. The powerful story of 9/11 isn't just about who did what to us, but also how we responded. And I have to say, I watched that day basically I was in Los Angeles. I had just moved there to start a new job, actually to start a company. And I think I was saved by watching the response of Americans that day. They really saved me from utter and complete, devastating, crippling despair. I was so proud of them and everything they did to try and save as many as they could and then rebuild. They spent 9 months at ground zero after the towers had fallen, pulling everyone they could, dead or alive, out of that pile. And they really restored my faith in human beings.
So you were in Los Angeles.
Yep.
And this was kind of in the early days of cell phones. You may have had one, but I'm sure you had a landline. Did somebody call you? Did someone call you and say, turn on the TV? Because it would have been early, 6 a.m. for you.
That's right. Yes, I was asleep. And my sister-in-law, this is not Chic's wife. This is my number 2 brother's wife. Number 2 brother is a heart surgeon. He didn't know because he was in the OR doing a case. So he didn't find out until he came out of there. But so his wife called me, and she said, "Deborah, you need to wake up. You need to put on your television set, and something terrible has happened." And basically, we were on the phone together watching these things unfold. The second tower had just been hit when she called me, because as you remember, everyone thought that the first impact on Tower 1 was a mistake, like an accident.
Yeah, I remember watching, I've told this story a couple of times. I had what I thought was a big interview scheduled between a couple of local politicians that didn't like each other. And we were in the break, and we had this bank of TVs, and we saw the first hole, and I thought, oh, it's one of those tour planes or tour things that go around the bay, because you don't realize how big the World Trade Towers is. You know what I mean? It's just so huge. Yeah. The hole was much bigger than it looked on television. I know that doesn't make sense, but that's the way I felt initially. And then in the next break, which was the news break that started around 8:57, we were standing there chit-chatting, and our eyes were drawn because we'd been sort of watching it. But then our eyes were drawn, and you actually saw the plane come around and hit the second building, and a much more direct hit, really, than the first one was, and a much bigger hole anyway.
Well, no, the first one was a direct hit. The first one was absolutely a direct hit.
Yes. But what I mean was not as big of a hole as the second one.
Oh, that's correct. That's true. The first one was a 757. Second one was a big, much bigger plane.
Yes.
And that's the kind of plane Chick was flying. No, Chick was on a 757 as well. But anyway, yes, it was. Everyone was. You couldn't. It's almost like your mind can't take in what you're seeing. So, because you'd never seen it before.
Did you and your sister-in-law immediately think, Chick may have been on this flight, or was that something you found out later?
Well, actually, no, found out later. As a matter of fact, I started getting calls. Have you seen this? Where's Chick? Is he okay? And because he flew those two airplanes were Boeing's 757 and 76. He flew both of those. That type of aircraft. That day he was on a 757. And I immediately said, "Oh no, Chick wouldn't have anything to do with he's never flying in New York airspace."
Right.
Because he was based in Washington D.C. and he flew he flew to Los Angeles. The pilots bid their flights every what they're going to do every month, and he liked flying long flights rather than short flights, and he usually tried to bid L.A. and that's where he was going that day. But I said, "Oh no, he's never in New York airspace." And of course, I wasn't thinking hijacking.
Yes.
As if he'd tell the hijacker where you want to go, right? I couldn't comprehend that this would be deliberate until the second plane.
Well, and I mean, in the fact it was so different than any other hijacking. Augie DeAugustinus was a Delta pilot that lived here in this community, and he did only overseas flights, and he was on. He got grounded that day, and then he was on the first flight to go across to pick up all the people that got stranded, over in Europe for a week.
Yeah,
because
they call them ferry flights.
Yes. So he went on that, and he said it was the eeriest thing in the world because there was no traffic going across the Atlantic, and at any given day, there's 100 planes going back and forth.
Right.
And so it was one of those things, but he said it changed. Up until then, you were told cooperate with the hijackers. You'll just end up in the wrong place, but you'll be fine. That's what you were told, and that changed on 9/11.
That's correct. They actually recovered the flight data recorder from Chick's plane, so that told us a lot about what happened. That covered the entire path of the plane, from the time it pushed back from the gate to the time it was crashed into the Pentagon. My two brothers and I, and also Mark Flagg, whose parents were on Chick's plane.
Yes.
We went and watched moment to moment from the data. They created an animated film video with basically a lot of data at the bottom, so we could see what happened. You could even see what was happening. We could see every time they turned the transponder on and off. We could see everything that was going on in the cockpit. And not people. This was just an animated depiction of what the plane did. And we brought Mark Flagg with us, his parents, Dee and Wilson Flagg.
And Mark went to Iraq with me. Mark went to Iraq with me.
Yeah, that's right, right. Yep. So he used to be a safety officer. He was also a Naval Academy guy who flew jets for the Navy, and he was a safety officer. So he knew how to read all the black box material. And so we said, "Come with us. They're going to show us this." And it was a genius for us to do that, because afterwards he took notes, and he told us everything that happened in that cockpit vis-a-vis the plane. So yeah, Chick was. A story that I've told people that's interesting is that Chick was sort of a news junkie, and he had followed the Egypt Air crash. That was when the co-pilot of that plane had right after takeoff from LAX had when his captain, I think it was Egypt Air, yes, he put the plane into a nosedive. Now the captain is desperately trying to get back in the cockpit, because he thinks his co-pilot has passed out or something, but it was a suicide. And anyway, Chick was obsessed with that, what was actually happening, and of course they're speaking in Arabic, but it was deliberate, and so that was a wake-up call for Chick about what could happen by nefarious means in the cockpit.
What a brilliant, what a brilliant man, and what a terrible loss.
And they were speaking Arabic, yeah.
And Debra, we are up against a break here, so we've got to go. But tell people how they can find out more about the 9/11 Museum.
Well, you can just go to their website, 9/11memorialandmuseum.com, or I think it's memorialmuseum.org. Excuse me. They'll tell you how to get there, what the programming is, give you advice about children. We built the museum for about a 12-year-old. If you have a really precocious child, that you can bring them in younger, but the material is kind of heavy for young children.
Absolutely.
But yes, that's where you go, and it's we've had millions of visitors now. Very successful museum.
Debra Burlingame, thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you for helping us remember.
Martha, you've been the best friend. Thank you so much for having me.
Putting the talk in news talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
I always want to remember the people from this community that died on 9/11. And Edna Stevens worked in the Pentagon and was killed on that day. And Major Cole Hogan Jr. also worked in the Pentagon and was killed on that day. And if you have not seen the memorial to them that is here on the square, you should do that because we need to remember that. But what you might not know is the first person to die in the 9/11 attacks was a man by the name of Danny Lewin. He was an American Israeli, and he tried to use his special forces skills, having been in the IDF, to stop the hijacking of Flight 11 that went into the World Trade Towers. So the first death in the World Trade Tower attack was an American Israeli by the name of Danny Lewin. Joining me right now is Eitan Weiss, who is the new Consul General for Israel and is here in the Southeast. And we wanted to talk with him today because we have a real kindred spirit on a day like today between Israel and America related to the issues that happened. Welcome so much, Eitan. It's so great to talk to you again.
Thank you very much, Martha, for having me.
Yes, and I learned that piece of information today, that the first person to die on 9/11 was an American Israeli. And it really kind of highlights the connection between our two countries because we really are fighting for the same things.
You're absolutely right, Martha. And I think even though 24 years has passed since 9/11, it's amazing that, every day you can find something new, a new story, a new world about a person who was important to his family, to his community, and even sometimes to the entire country that, did something to try to prevent or try to, minimize as much as he can all the casualties that took place in 9/11. And it's really crazy that, think about it, 24 years after, and we don't really know everything, all the loss that happened there on 9/11. And I'm sorry, but today is a really sad day, and it should be a sad day, not just to the American people and to the Israeli people, but to the entire free world, because what happened in 9/11 was a threat not just to the U.S. or to Israel, but the entire Western society, the free, loving society of the world.
And, I would argue we need to learn a lot more about how we should act and what we should be afraid of and what we should fight for. I always ask guests that I have on this day, where were you on September 11th, 2001?
In 2001, I just got dismissed from the military after, finishing my 3 years mandatory service. And I was working for a cell phone company in Israel in the call center. And, this is the best example to show how kindred spirit the Israeli and the American people are, because the moment it happened, all Israel came to a stop. Literally, I remember the CEO of the company running in the call center and calling everyone, stop working, you have to go online now and see exactly what's happening. Literally, everyone stopped. And I remember all phones went silent. We sat in front of a large TV and saw everything as it transpired. And don't forget that there's a 7-hour time difference, but nonetheless, we were all there. And I remember, everyone was in shock. Everyone was in shock because of this atrocious act. And at that moment, literally, we all stopped doing what we did and pondered and thought of, wow, what's next? The next thing I remember is making phone calls to friends of mine who live in the United States, making sure they're fine. And family members. I have family in Minnesota, and just making sure everything is fine because no one knew what would happen next. And the next thing I remember, I got a call from my former military officer saying, listen, you need to check in. We don't know what's going to happen. We're basically enlisting now and just preparing for the worst scenario that can happen. And that literally took a couple of days before things mellowed down a bit, but the shock still remains.
Yeah, it is one of those things. I had scheduled this interview that I thought was going to be this big interview between a county commissioner and a county commission chair that weren't getting along very well. And I had brokered this deal to have them in on that day. And I thought that was going to be the big day, the big interview of the day. And at that time, my show was 8:30 to 10. And so we had this bank of TVs that were on the wall. And we all saw in the 8:45 break the first plane hit. And the initial thought was, oh, it's one of those tourist planes, because you don't realize how big the World Trade Towers is, and that even though that was a big airliner, it looked like a small hole in the first building that was hit. And then as we were in the news break, we saw the other plane come around and hit. And at that point, we knew, it was one of those lines that was crossed. We knew our lives were going to change forever because of this attack. And to kind of fast forward, because I want to never forget what else is happening as we're coming up on the second anniversary of the attack on Israel. And it was your 9/11. And it was the same forces that were behind that attack that were behind who attacked us.
You're absolutely right, Martha. And actually, this is the line that is connecting what happened on 9/11 and what happened on October 7th. And the line is very simple. There's a war going on between forces of evil and forces of good. And what we all need to know and what we all need to learn from this is that we need to be united. We must be united against those forces of evil, because once you're not able to speak openly and share your opinions with others without the risk of being threatened by your friends, peers, and family members, then what's the point? We need to remember, and that's, by the way, connecting to what the atrocious murder of Charlie Kirk yesterday, is that we need to remember, and 9/11 and October 7th should be an important reminder to us all that the enemy is not us. The enemy is not internal. The enemy is external, and we need to be united. We need to stand together, Americans, Israelis alike, and the entire Western world against those forces of evil.
Yes, and Prime Minister Netanyahu made a very strong and positive statement about Charlie Kirk yesterday. And, we all, it's one of those moments. My husband and I were at home, and we heard that he had been shot. And we watched the news coverage, and I try not to watch those videos, because you can't unwatch them once you do, but it was hard to miss. And we saw, and my husband's a physician, and he said it's going to be unlikely he's going to be able to survive this, because it was such a traumatic hit and a direct hit to a place where we're very vulnerable as humans. I had a very good friend of mine's son who died in April of 2004 in Iraq, and he was a great commander, and they had all the body armor on, but there's this place between the end of your helmet and the beginning of your armor that's on your body that you're very vulnerable, right there in your neck. And that's how he was killed. So it was a terrible thing, because Charlie Kirk was going around to college campuses, going into the lion's den, if you will, and taking on questions from people who didn't disagree with him or didn't agree with him. If you can't do that, you can't have a republic.
You're absolutely right. If we cannot have a conversation with people who do not share the same beliefs and ideals we do, then what's the point? Then you're talking about theocracy, you're talking about totalitarianism. Because the amazing thing about democracy is that we need, and it's extremely necessary to have dialogue with people who do not share the same beliefs we do, because through this dialogue, through this debate, each side understands, okay, I know what the other side thinks. Now I know what's important to the other side. We need to find the middle ground, because, as I said, the enemy is out there. And the enemy is trying to get us, and that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to create a rift, an internal rift here in the U.S. and in Israel and in the entire free world. And this is the thing we need to remind and make everyone remember.
There's a lot of news that's happened this week, and of course there was a taking out of some terrorists that were meeting in Abu Dhabi this week, and there's been some controversy around that. So I wanted to talk with him about Israel's perspective on that and what we need to think about. And so I got to tell you, Eitan, Qatar is a conundrum for me because on the one hand, they seem to want to be a part of the Abraham Accords. They're not there yet. They seem to want to be a part of the new world, if you will. But on the other hand, the family members of Hamas are living the high life in Abu Dhabi and other places, and they are hosting terrorist leaders, and we're negotiating with those terrorist leaders as if we can trust them. And I have a problem with that.
Well, I think that what happened in Qatar a couple of days ago should serve as a reminder to all of those who are trying to do whatever they can to murder innocent people around the world, is that nowhere is safe for you. We tried to take out the leadership of Hamas, and may I remind you that Hamas is a terrorist organization that butchered almost 1,500 Israelis on October 7, and many, many more before that. Not just butchering innocent Israelis, but also butchering innocent Palestinians, and they still do that. And when you look at it, Hamas controls the Gaza, and Hamas treats its own people in an atrocious way. And this attempt to take out their leadership was a strong reminder to everyone that there's no place in the world that you'll be safe in. Not to mention that ever since October 7, we tried, through the assistance of the American administration, to reach some sort of an agreement with that terrorist organization that they release the hostages. 48 hostages are still in their control, in their possession. We want them back. Simple as that.
So do you think that and I know you can't, shoulda, coulda, woulda, what would have happened, we can't do that, but, early on when they did the first hostage release back in November of 23, after 55 days, I think it was, they could have released all the hostages then, put their arms down, and some kind of agreement would have, I think, been negotiated. But it seems the longer they wait, my concern is their only bargaining chip left is the hostages. So I think Israel did recover some hostage remains recently. There's other things going on there. I mean, I'm sure you've been trying to do that since the beginning of this war.
Yes.
I just don't know how this is going to end. What do you think is going to happen?
So that's a great question, Martha.
No, I'm
First,
sorry.
Again,
it's a vague question.
That's what you're getting paid for. No, it's a great question. I'll tell you why. Because, first of all, people need to understand and remember that we're dealing with a terrorist organization. They have no value to human lives. Not our lives, not their own people's lives, because they're sacrificing their own people because of this Islamic, fundamentalist Islamic jihad notion of Islam needs to control everything. Israel doesn't have a right to exist and all of that. Now, when you're dealing with such an irrational actor that its only rationale is to kill, you need to do whatever you can to destroy them. We tried through negotiations. It didn't work because whenever we reached some sort of an understanding, Hamas was the only one saying at the end of the day, no, we don't want to deal. Why? Because they do not want to relinquish their power. They do not want to abandon their dream of destruction of not just Israel, but the entire Western world. This is what they're planning to do. You can't say that Hamas is different from ISIS. They're not. Hamas, ISIS, Muslim Brotherhood, the Taliban, all of these organizations are the same. They have no place in this world, and we need to do whatever we can to take them out. Simple as that.
Now, you have in Israel Muslim communities that live peacefully in Israel that are a part of the community. Here in America, other places around the world, there are Muslim communities that are assimilating, they are a part of the community, and they work. 2 weeks ago in America, there was a meeting in Michigan where an imam who is an American citizen and runs a mosque in Michigan and said that America is the head of the snake and we must kill the snake. This is in America, using our own free speech rules to threaten us. Last week in Houston, Texas, an imam went into a business that was run by a Muslim and said, we may not be in power now, but and I'm paraphrasing, but when we get in power, we're going to, institute rules where you're not going to be able to do the kind of business that you do. So, and there's stories like this. Those are two stories. They're all over the Western world. Stories like this are happening. Did we learn nothing from the radical Islamic attack on us on 9/11? I'm so frustrated that you still have people say you can't call attention to those kinds of things. But if we don't, we're going to lose everything that we have worked for and that our forefathers have put together.
Well, in a way, Martha, the sad truth is that fundamentalist Islam, and I'm talking about the extreme part of it, are definitely using or misusing the freedoms and rights that we believe in, that we adhere in order to foster and promote their atrocious desires. And, everyone needs to understand that, because if they're using the rules of the game to their own advantage and by so changing the rules of the game, so actually what the future will look like.
Absolutely.
And that's something we all need to think about and try to prevent for the sake of our kids, of our grandkids.
Well, I appreciate you being with us today, and I know that it's a somber day. I think that we have to remember, and there's a lot of people living today, many people on that college campus yesterday that weren't alive when 9/11 happened. And that's why it's important that we remember that, we don't just say never forget as a slogan, that we as grown-ups and humans in this world, that we educate the people around us. We can't count on government to do this. And we've got to make sure we keep the memories alive.
You're absolutely right.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Martha.
It's local radio, and that's why you're listening. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
I got to tell you, I am so honored today to have Gianno Caldwell on this program today. I have followed his work for many years, and he wrote a book called The Day My Brother Was Murdered, but also he is talking about the work that's being done by the Trump administration. And Gianno, I just want to say thank you so much for being here today.
It is my honor to join you.
So tell us, first of all, your story and how you got so involved in this issue.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share that. On June 24th, 2022, my life changed forever when my innocent teenage baby brother Christian was murdered in Chicago. And since then, I've been out on a mission, not just for him, but for other families who've been impacted by violent crime throughout our nation. I started the Caldwell Institute for Public Safety at caldwellinstitute.org. Please support our efforts there to go after those George Soros-funded progressive prosecutors who refuse to enforce the law and who are terribly soft on crime. Additionally, we've just recently expanded out to the mayoral races and gubernatorial races across the country to ensure that victims of violent crime, their voices are heard loud and clear. Enough is enough. We have to be tough on crime. We have to be about law and order. We have to get our country back because families' lives are on the line.
Have you ever, and this may be too personal of a question, but have you ever thought about not only how your life changed on that day, but the direction of your life? Because obviously you want your baby brother back. I mean, that's what you would want. But I know for me, I had 3 members of my family die of the same kind of cancer. It's not exactly the same thing, but within a very short period of time. And it caused me to kind of change the direction of my life and what I was involved in. Have you thought about that?
You know, I had a conversation which I write about in my book, The Day My Brother Was Murdered, My Journey Through America's Violent Crime Crisis. That's the name of it, available everywhere. I had a conversation with Dr. Drew Pinsky from Celebrity Rehab Teen Mom, and he was telling me, and this is probably something good for you to even consider and think about as well. He said, after me asking, how do I get peace? How do I get beyond this situation and find peace? Because that has been a very difficult journey for me. And he said the way you can find a bit of peace, and I'm sorry, but this pain is going to be with you forever, he says, but what you can do is do something that would further their legacy. And that's when I started the Caldwell Institute for Public Safety. Because although I can't get my brother back, he's gone forever. I recognize that. But there are lives that can be saved with his legacy. And that's why this fight is so important. And I'm so thankful to President Trump, because in Chicago, we've not had a president that cared or seemingly cared as much, especially when you have somebody who was from Chicago, at least it was his adopted hometown, Barack Obama, who never mentioned the realities, the suffering that people are going through in the city of Chicago. President Trump is the only one that cared enough to mention it, and it was actually not just talking about it, but also putting forth actions to make people safer. That is rare. And what we saw through Joe Biden's open border, which allowed in numerous criminals, terrorists, people with terrorist ties, people who in some cases were on the most wanted list by way of the FBI, those individuals that have come over and brought drugs and a number of different things into our country, which has negatively impacted the citizens all across the country. People have committed crimes, etc. The actions that he's taken to close the border, the actions that he's now taken in cities, D.C. included, and across the country, are literally saving lives. And this is what we must be about. I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative, not ashamed of it. I've been a conservative for 20-plus years. And I've never seen a Republican Party that was this focused on the issues of the day that the American people, by and large, and that doesn't, it doesn't matter what their politics are. They can be a Democrat, they can be an independent, they can be a Republican, but a president who's about the people's business. And I'm honored to know that he is doing it for my hometown, which needs a tremendous amount of help.
We're talking to Gianno Caldwell about Make Chicago Safe Again. Also, he has a book out that is available everywhere, The Day My Brother Was Murdered, My Journey Through America's Violent Crime Crisis. So, it's a wonderful book. It'll be a hard read, folks. I'll warn you about that. You'll cry. You will feel emotion, but we've got to feel those emotions. We have gotten so desensitized because we scroll and we don't believe anything. We see it there, but we gotta, I call it throwing the rock in the water and watching the ripples go out. We've got to engage and make these things better.
100%. And that's partly why I wrote the book that I did and how I wrote it. So in this book, I don't just talk about my brother. I cover 8 other families experience the same tragedy as me on that very day. People like James, who was an Army veteran out of Philadelphia. He would often go to a park at 1 or 2 a.m. because he couldn't sleep. He had PTSD. And on that day, June 24th, the same day as my brother, he went into that park and he saw kids. Some were teenage, some were younger than that. And he said, "What are you all doing here in this park at this hour?" These kids beat him to death with a traffic cone. Or Catherine from Burleson, Texas, a mother, wife, grandmother, who was a chemical engineer going home on June 24th from her job. A shootout took place on a highway, drug deal went bad, and she was a victim to violent crime on that day. I not only talk about people who experience these tragedies, but what can we do about it? Solutions. I interview people like Sean Hannity, John Walsh from America's Most Wanted, Dr. Drew Pinsky. I interview educators, former prosecutors, and police chiefs about this book, law enforcement. These things are extraordinarily important, and it appears more and more, especially with the recent polling out showing that 81% of Americans see violent crime as a major issue in our cities. And we're talking about a significant percentage of Democrats, almost 70% of Democrats actually agree with that. So that says that the awareness that is being raised, The impact that is being made across the country, and certainly the fear that has gone on has reached a fever pitch for so many people. But when you look at it, this isn't a Trump issue. This is what Biden helped bring into the country. This is also what these Democrats, whether they be governors or mayors, have allowed to have happen in our states and in our cities. Places like Illinois with the Safety Act, which eliminated cash bail. Those issues.
And it's so true, Gianno, because it's like I'm old enough to remember the 70s in America, okay? And, yeah, I was going to high school and college in the 70s, so it was pretty fun for me. But when you look at where our country was in the 70s, you had violence in the cities. You had people fleeing the cities and moving to the suburbs during that period of time, and people thinking that cities were in decline. Okay, I have this theory about these 50-year cycles because we get just far enough away that we forget what worked, and then we start trying things that don't work. And that's what we're seeing in these cities around the country. That, I mean, Rudy Giuliani, I know that a lot of people think different things about him now, but he came into New York as the mayor and started actually doing real policing again, and New York became safe for a generation. And now look at it.
No, 100%. And I think what we've seen through President Trump in D.C. is employing many of the similar tactics. As people are familiar with the broken windows theory, which show that if you clean up these areas, you ensure that there's not even a broken window, that people will respect the area and they will commit less crime. And the beautification of D.C. is exactly what he's doing. And, I got to tell you, though, I've been working for Fox News Channel as a Fox News political analyst for 7 years now. We've been talking about this issue for many, many years on air, and especially since my brother, obviously. But what I can tell you is that this information is not being suppressed like a lot of news organizations. If it was bad news about Joe Biden, you saw them suppress it. In local areas, if it's bad news about the Democrats in Chicago, you'll sometimes see that suppression. They can't do it anymore. The poll numbers are showing that this is an issue that resonates with individuals all over the country, no matter what their affiliations or ideologies are. We have to make America a safe place for everyone, no matter what city, no matter what state. We must do this, and we must do it now.
So let me ask you a question. Do you think, as Donald Trump, and this will be the last question, as we move forward with the Make Chicago Safe Again, he's not going to be invited in there, and it's a different situation than D.C. Do you think that the strategy should be, and I'm not asking you to advise the president, I just want to know what you think, should the strategy be to go to states like Louisiana, where they're going to invite him into New Orleans because it's a Republican governor, and keep showing the wins of getting places safer so that we can get the people of Chicago, the people of Los Angeles, the people of New York to get up and say, hey, we want this too?
President Trump is the president of every state, no matter if it's red or blue. He's the president of every city, no matter if it's red or blue. And I'll tell you, the victims of violent crime in Chicago are begging for him to come in. Forget the city officials. They failed. They failed a long time ago. They failed decade after decade. And to be honest with you, most of the victims of this violent crime issue are black. And what I've come to realize and know that black lives don't matter to Democrats, it's black votes that do. President Trump, come into every city that needs your help. This is your requirement as the commander-in-chief. Safety is the number one issue for any elected officials. It really should be. President Trump has taken his oath of office seriously, and we have to do what's right for the country, regardless of what the Democrat elected officials in any state, any city, any locality believe.
Absolutely. Gianno Caldwell, if people want to get your book, how can they do that?
Well, thank you again for having me. I would encourage people to go to caldwellinstitute.org, support our efforts there for the Caldwell Institute for Public Safety, and you can get my book on Amazon or anywhere where books are sold. I would also encourage people to follow me on social media at Gianno Caldwell, Gianno, Caldwell, Caldwell, and that's on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and it's been a blessing to talk to you today. Thank you.
Absolutely.
To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.